They say the worst violence happens in darkness. Back alleys, abandoned warehouses, places where screams get swallowed. But for Sophia Simone, it happened at 1 p.m. on a sunlit patio, where silverware clinked and businessmen laughed over Chianti. She was just a pregnant waitress refilling water glasses. He was Mario Bellini, the man every made man in Chicago feared. But she spotted what no one else did. The customer in the background, casual as Sunday, with a beretta resting against his thigh like a sleeping viper. She didn't think. She lunged. But here's what the cameras didn't catch. The woman who saved Mario Bellini's life was wearing a locket with enough encrypted evidence to end him. The babies she was protecting? They were supposed to be her weapon, not her weakness. This is the story of how a hero became a traitor, and a traitor became a mother. Comment where you are watching from and time. I'm responding to everyone. Sophia's feet were screaming, not the dull ache she'd grown accustomed to over the past 8 months, but the sharp, electric burn of swollen ankles stuffed into non-slip shoes that hadn't fit properly in weeks. Each step across Al Dente's sun-drenched patio felt like walking on broken glass, her lower back throbbing in rhythm with the twins, doing what felt like gymnastics against her ribs. She pressed one hand against the small of her back, the other balancing a water pitcher that suddenly weighed as much as a small car. The lunch rush was in full swing. Executives in tailored suits occupied every table, their voices a pleasant hum of merger talks and golf handicaps. Sunlight filtered through the pergola overhead, dappling the terracotta tiles in golden warmth. It was the kind of scene that belonged on a postcard, not in Sophia's life. Table 6 needed water. She moved toward it, her belly leading the way like the prow of a ship. The twins kicked simultaneously, and she winced, adjusting her grip on the pitcher. 2 more hours, just 2 more hours, and she could go home, elevate her feet, and count the meager tips that were supposed to somehow transform into diapers and formula, and a future that didn't terrify her. Mario Bellini sat at table 6 like he owned the place, which, if the rumors were true, he probably did. He cut into his rigatoni with surgical precision, his movements economical, controlled. Everything about him screamed power, from the cut of his charcoal suit to the way the other diners unconsciously angled their bodies away from him. His 2 associates flanked him, silent sentries in expensive wool. Sophia had served dangerous men before. You didn't work in this part of Chicago without learning to read the room, to pour wine with steady hands while your instincts screamed at you to run. But Bellini was different. He didn't need to posture or threaten. Danger clung to him like cologne. She refilled his water glass without making eye contact, a skill she'd perfected. Invisible, forgettable. That's how you survived when predators sat at your tables. She was turning away when something caught her peripheral vision, a wrongness that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Table 9. The man in the navy tie. He'd been there for 40 minutes, nursing the same espresso, his posture too rigid for someone supposedly relaxed on a lunch break. While everyone else gestured and laughed and lived, he sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on something just past her left shoulder, on Mario Bellini. Sophia's gaze dropped, following the unnatural line of his right arm. His hand rested on his thigh beneath the table, but the angle was wrong. Too straight, too deliberate. The beretta's brushed steel finish caught a slice of sunlight. Time fractured. Her mind registered the details in crystalline clarity. The slight forward lean of his shoulders, the shallow breath that preceded action. He was going to shoot. Right now. Right here. In this sun-soaked paradise where children ate gelato 2 tables over. Sophia didn't think. Thinking was for people who had the luxury of self-preservation. She threw her weight forward, 8 months pregnant with twins, ankles swollen, exhausted down to her bones, and she launched herself at Mario Bellini like a linebacker. The water pitcher flew from her hands, arcing through the air in a crystal spray that caught the sunlight like diamonds. She collided with Bellini just as the suppressor sneezed. The sound was almost polite, a gentleman's cough at the opera, but Sophia felt the heat of the bullet's passage sear across her left side, felt the wet bloom of something hot and wrong spreading across her ribs. Bellini went down hard beneath her, his chair shattering. They hit the terracotta together, Sophia's belly colliding with his chest, her hands splayed across the broken tile. Glass from the pitcher bit into her palms. Someone was screaming. Maybe her. Maybe everyone. Chaos erupted like a grenade. Tables overturned. Men in suits hit the ground or bolted for the exits. Bellini's associates materialized with weapons drawn, their eyes scanning for the threat. Sophia's vision tunneled. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the fire spreading through her side and the terrifying stillness of the babies who'd been kicking just seconds ago. Strong hands gripped her shoulders. Bellini's face swam into focus above her, his dark eyes wide with something that might have been shock. His lips were moving, but she couldn't hear the words over the rushing in her ears. Her hand found her belly, fingers splayed across the stretched fabric of her uniform. "Please," she whispered, though she didn't know who she was begging. God. Bellini. The universe. Please, not them. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was Bellini's blood-spattered face, and the first flicker of recognition in his eyes as he realized what she'd done, what she'd risked, who she'd saved. The world came back in fragments, voices barking orders, the metallic taste of blood in her mouth, pressure against her side that made her want to scream. "We need an ambulance," someone was shouting. One of the businessmen, his voice high with panic. "She's bleeding, she's—" "No." Mario Bellini's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "No ambulance, no police, get the car." Sophia's eyes fluttered open. The sky above was too bright, the sun a merciless white disk that made her vision swim. Faces hovered at the edges of her awareness, mouths moving in silent horror. She tried to sit up, but agony lanced through her side. "Don't move." Bellini's face blocked out the sun. His hands were on her shoulders. Firm but not rough. There was blood on his collar. Hers, probably. "Stay still." The babies. Her voice came out as a rasp. Her hands found her belly, fingers trembling as they searched for movement. "Are they? How far along are you?" The question was sharp, urgent. 8 months. Twins. She gasped as another wave of pain rolled through her. "Please, I need a hospital. They need—" "Can't do that." He was already moving, sliding one arm beneath her shoulders, the other under her knees. "Marco, the car. Now." "Boss, she needs medical—" one of his associates started. "She needs discretion." Bellini lifted her like she weighed nothing, despite the awkward bulk of her belly. "The shooter's still out there. We go to a hospital. We're sitting ducks. Get the car." Sophia's head lolled against his chest as he carried her through the chaos. The patio was a war zone, overturned tables, shattered glass, abandoned meals growing cold in the sunlight. Someone had covered the spot where the bullet struck with a tablecloth, but she could see the dark stain spreading underneath. Her hand flew to her neck, fingers closing around the delicate chain, the locket. Still there. The metal was warm against her palm, and she clutched it tight enough to hurt. Everything she'd endured for the past 6 months, the fear, the loneliness, the careful planning, it all came down to this small piece of metal hanging against her heart. What is that? Bellini's eyes tracked her movement. Nothing. She tucked it beneath her collar with shaking fingers. Family heirloom. He didn't believe her. She could see it in the slight narrowing of his eyes. But then they were moving again, and he carried her through the restaurant's interior, past the kitchen, where cooks stood, frozen with knives and pans, past the bar where bottles still gleamed in tidy rows. The armored SUV waited in the alley, black and hulking, its engine already running. Marco held the door open, his face grim. Bellini slid into the back seat, with Sophia still cradled against him, maneuvering carefully to avoid jostling her belly. "Drive," he snapped, as Marco climbed into the front. "The safe house on Erie, and lose anyone following." The SUV lurched forward. Sophia bit back a cry as the movement sent fresh agony through her side. She could feel the wetness spreading beneath her uniform, warm and sticky. Too much blood. Way too much blood. "How bad is it?" She forced the words out through clenched teeth. Bellini was already pulling her uniform away from the wound, his movements precise, despite the vehicle's motion. His jaw tightened as he examined the damage. Graze. Deep, but it didn't penetrate the abdominal wall. "You got lucky." Lucky. She wanted to laugh, but it hurt too much. Lucky would have been not working today. Lucky would have been the shooter having worse aim, or better aim, or not existing at all. "The babies," she whispered. His hand moved to her belly, palm flat against the stretched fabric. For a long moment, nothing. Then, a kick. Small, but definite. Sophia's breath hitched. "They're moving." His voice carried something that might have been relief. "That's good. That's—" He reached for something in the seat pocket, came up with a first aid kit. "I need to stop the bleeding. This is going to hurt." He didn't wait for her consent. Gauze pressed against her side, and this time Sophia did scream, her back arching off the seat. The locket swung free from her collar, catching the light filtering through the tinted windows. Bellini's hand shot out, catching it before it could fall back. His thumb traced the ornate surface, feeling the irregular edge where the data chip was hidden inside. Some heirloom. Sophia's fingers closed over his, trapping the locket between their palms. "It's all I have left of my husband." "Your husband?" His eyes found hers, dark and unreadable. "Where is he?" "Dead." The word tasted like ashes. 6 months ago. Something flickered across Bellini's face. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. He released the locket, let it fall back against her chest. What was his name? Does it matter? She was getting lightheaded now, the pain and blood loss dragging her toward unconsciousness. "I saved your life. That should be enough." Nothing's ever enough. But he went back to tending her wound, his hand steady even as the SUV took a corner hard enough to make the tires squeal. "Why'd you do it? Jump! You're 8 months pregnant. You could have gotten yourself killed. Could have killed them." Sophia's hand found her belly again, fingers playing protectively. Why had she jumped? The smart play would have been to let the bullet fly, let Chicago's most dangerous man take the hit he probably deserved. But when she'd seen that gun, seen the angle, calculated the trajectory, all she'd thought about was the babies, about them growing up in a world where she'd stood by and watched murder happen. About the kind of mother who could do that. "I don't know," she whispered. It wasn't entirely a lie. The SUV pulled into an underground garage, the sudden darkness a relief after the brutal sunlight. Bellini was already moving, gathering her into his arms again. She caught a glimpse of concrete walls, security cameras, steel doors that looked like they belonged in a bank vault. "Boss, I've got Dr. Russo on the line," Marco said. "He's 10 minutes out." Tell him to bring everything he'd need for a pregnant woman. Ultrasound, fetal monitor, the works. Bellini carried her through a door that opened onto a sterile hallway. And tell him if he mentions this to anyone, he won't need his medical license where he's going. Sophia's vision was fading again, the edges going soft and dark, but her fingers never loosened on the locket. Even as Bellini laid her on a bed in a room that smelled of antiseptic and fear, even as hands she couldn't see began cutting away her bloody uniform, she held on. The evidence that could destroy him pressed against her heart, hidden in plain sight, just like she was. Sophia woke to the sound of a mobile playing Brahms' lullaby. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was dreaming. The medication they'd given her, whatever Dr. Russo had pumped into her veins, had left her thoughts syrupy and slow. But the music was real. Delicate notes chiming above her head, accompanied by slowly rotating stars and moons cast in brushed silver. She blinked at the ceiling, not the water-stained tiles of her studio apartment, not the sterile white of a hospital room. This ceiling was painted a soft sage green, the kind of color you'd find in a design magazine under serene nursery themes. Sophia turned her head, and the breath caught in her throat. She was lying in a hospital bed, yes, but the bed was positioned in what could only be described as a fully appointed nursery. 2 cribs stood against the far wall, their white rails pristine and unused. A rocking chair sat by the window, cushioned in cream linen. Shelves lined with unopened boxes, monitors, sterilizers, warmers, all top of the line. A changing table stocked with diapers still in their packaging. Everything coordinated in shades of white and grey, and that same peaceful sage. Everything perfect. Everything waiting. Everything abandoned. "You're awake." Mario Bellini stood in the doorway, a coffee cup in his hand. He'd changed clothes, the blood-spattered suit replaced by dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like he hadn't slept. "How's the pain?" Sophia's hand went to her side, found clean bandages beneath the hospital gown someone had dressed her in. Manageable. Her voice came out hoarse. "The baby's fine. Strong heartbeats, no signs of distress. Dr. Russo monitored them for 3 hours. He stepped into the room, and Sophia noticed the way his eyes avoided the cribs, the unopened boxes. "You were lucky. Another inch to the right." "Whose room is this?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Bellini's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared at the mobile still playing its gentle melody. "My wife's was going to be." He set the coffee cup down on a dresser with careful precision. "She died before we could use it. Car accident. Her and the baby both." The pain in his voice was old but not healed, like a badly set bone. Sophia's hand moved to her belly, an instinctive gesture of protection. "I'm sorry. 3 years ago." He turned to face her fully, and the grief was gone, locked away behind the mask he showed the world. Which brings me to my question. Why'd you do it, Sophia? And don't tell me you don't know. You had time to think while you were unconscious. She'd had time to prepare this answer, had rehearsed it in the moments before the medication dragged her under. "I'm 8 months pregnant with twins. I'm broke. I work at a bistro for minimum wage, plus tips that barely cover rent." She met his eyes. Let him see the desperation that wasn't entirely fabricated. "You're Mario Bellini. Everyone knows who you are, what you can do. I thought, if I saved your life, maybe you'd help me. Help them." So it was calculated. Something that might have been disappointment crossed his face. A business transaction. No. This part was true, which made it easier to sell. When I saw that gun, I didn't think about money or favors. I just moved. But now, she gestured at the room, the medical equipment, the fact that she was alive and her babies were safe. Now I'm thinking maybe there's a reason I'm here, in this room. Maybe it's fate or God or just dumb luck. But I saved you, and you saved us, and I need help I can't get anywhere else. Bellini studied her, his dark eyes searching for the lie beneath the truth. What happened to your husband? Really? Sophia's hand found the locket again, the metal warm against her palm. He died in a warehouse fire. South Side. Police said it was gang-related. Wrong place, wrong time. She swallowed hard. They never found enough of him to bury. She watched Bellini's face carefully, looking for recognition, for guilt, for any sign that he knew the warehouse had been his, that the fire had been set by his people, that her husband had burned alive for stealing from the Bellini family. But if he knew, his expression didn't betray it. What was his name? Does it matter? She turned her face away. He's gone. I'm alone. And in a month, I'll have 2 babies, and nowhere safe to raise them. You're not alone anymore. Bellini moved to the window, looked out at whatever view his fortress afforded. You took a bullet for me. That means something. It means I owe you. I don't want charity. Good, because I don't give it. He turned back to her, and now she saw the calculation in his eyes, the same arithmetic that had built his empire. You stay here until you deliver. Full medical care, security, everything you need. After the babies come, we'll discuss long-term arrangements. It was exactly what she'd hoped for. Access to his home, his trust, his guard lowered just enough for her to complete her mission. So why did her stomach twist with something that felt uncomfortably like guilt? Why? She asked. Why help me? Bellini's gaze drifted to the cribs again, to the future that had died with his wife. Because those babies deserve better than what the world gave them. And because maybe... He paused, seemed to be choosing his words carefully. Maybe this room deserves to be used for what it was meant for. After he left, Sophia waited a full 10 minutes before reaching for her clothes. They'd been cleaned and folded, placed on a chair beside the bed. Her phone was in the pocket, battery nearly dead but functional. She typed quickly, hands shaking. I'm in. Full access. Need 2 weeks to locate the safe. The response came within seconds. You have 1 week. He finds that evidence. You're dead. Your babies are dead. Don't forget what you owe us. Sophia deleted the messages, her thumb hovering over the locket's clasp. Inside was a data chip containing 6 months of her dead husband's digital footprints, bank transfers, shell companies, names and dates that would unravel the Bellini empire like pulling a thread. Her husband's former associates wanted it planted in Bellini's personal safe, insurance against the man they feared most. They'd promised her freedom in exchange, a new identity, money, safety for her and the twins. All she had to do was betray the man who'd just offered her sanctuary in the room he'd built for his own lost child. Sophia closed her fist around the locket and felt the sharp edges bite into her palm. 1 week. She had 1 week to decide who she was. The desperate widow playing both sides to survive, or the woman who'd thrown herself in front of a bullet without thinking of the cost. The mobile above her head continued its lullaby, stars and moons turning in their eternal rotation, and Sophia closed her eyes against the tears that suddenly threatened. In the corner, the empty cribs waited. The 3rd day in the nursery. Sophia made it exactly 6 steps before her legs betrayed her. She'd been trying to reach the bathroom on her own, tired of pressing the call button, tired of being helpless. The wound in her side pulled with each movement, a sharp reminder that her body was holding together with little more than stitches and stubborn will. But it was the weight of the twins that finally defeated her. 8 months of pregnancy, combined with 3 days of bed rest, had turned her legs to water. She grabbed for the dresser and missed. Strong hands caught her before she hit the floor, arms sliding around her with practiced ease. She knew without looking that it was Bellini. He'd been hovering for days, checking on her with a frequency that felt less like surveillance and more like concern. "I had it," she gasped, even as she sagged against his chest. Clearly, but there was no mockery in his voice, just that same careful gentleness he'd used when carrying her from the SUV. "Bathroom?" She nodded, humiliated by her own weakness. He guided her across the room, his arm firm around her waist, taking most of her weight. She could feel the warmth of him through the thin cotton of her nightgown, solid and steady in a way that made her throat tight. "I've got it from here," she said when they reached the door. "You sure? Because 6 steps ago you had it, too. I'm not completely helpless." "No." His eyes met hers, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You're just recovering from a gunshot wound while 8 months pregnant with twins, but completely capable. My mistake." She wanted to argue, but another pull from her side made her wince. Bellini saw it, and his jaw tightened. "I'll be right outside. Yell if you need me." When she emerged 5 minutes later, he was leaning against the wall exactly where he'd promised, scrolling through his phone with the studied casualness of someone trying to preserve her dignity. He pocketed it immediately when she appeared. "Back to bed," he said. It wasn't a question. This time she didn't protest. The walk had exhausted her more than she wanted to admit. He helped her across the room, and she was uncomfortably aware of how thin the nightgown was, how close his hands were to skin. She settled back against the pillows with a sigh that was equal parts relief and frustration. "How long did Dr. Russo say before I can move normally?" "He said you're not moving anywhere for at least 2 weeks, which means a month." "Knowing you." Bellini pulled the rocking chair closer to the bed, sat down with the ease of someone who'd spent considerable time in that exact position. "You're healing well, but you're also growing 2 humans. Your body needs rest." "My body needs to not be a prisoner." "Guest," he corrected. "Guests don't get shot at." "Neither do most people having lunch." A smile ghosted across his face, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. "Fair point." One of the twins chose that moment to execute what felt like a full gymnastics routine against her ribs. Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her belly. The movement was sharp enough that it was visible through the nightgown, a distinct bulge pressing out before retreating. Bellini leaned forward, his casual posture forgotten. Is that normal?" "Unfortunately." She rubbed the spot where a tiny foot or elbow had just jabbed her. "They've been active since the shooting. Dr. Russo says it's a good sign, but it feels like they're training for a cage match in there." Another kick, this one even harder. Sophia winced, and before she could think better of it, she reached for Bellini's hand. "Here, feel." She pressed his palm against the spot where the twin was pushing. For a moment, nothing. Then, a solid thump against his hand, strong enough that his eyes widened. "That's—" He trailed off, and Sophia watched something crack in his carefully controlled expression. Wonder, she realized, and grief so raw it hurt to witness. The baby kicked again, and this time Bellini's thumb moved, tracing the outline of what might have been a foot. His other hand joined the first, spanning her belly with a reverence that made Sophia's chest ache. "I can feel both of them," he whispered. "One here, one lower." "They're big," Sophia finished. "Dr. Russo estimates 6 pounds each already. I'm going to be the size of a house by the time they're done." But Bellini wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on her belly, watching the twins move beneath his palms. A muscle worked in his jaw, and when he finally looked up, his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me." He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Sophia understood. This room, these cribs, the unopened boxes, they'd been waiting for a moment exactly like this one. A moment stolen by death and grief and the cruelty of timing. "Marco told me what happened," she said softly. "Your wife. I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover it." Bellini's hands stilled on her belly, but he didn't pull away. "Drunk driver. Ran a red light going 60. She died on impact. The baby." He swallowed hard. "The baby held on for 3 hours. Long enough for me to get to the hospital. Not long enough for anything else." "How far along was she?" 7 months. "A girl." His thumb traced another small movement. "We were going to name her Isabella." The weight of it settled between them, heavy and sacred. Sophia's hand covered his, and for a moment they sat like that, his palms on her belly, her fingers threaded through his, two broken people sharing a heartbeat that wasn't their own. "Your husband," Bellini said finally. "The warehouse fire? South Side? 6 months ago." Sophia's entire body went rigid. "What about it? It was my warehouse, my inventory." His eyes found hers, and what she saw there wasn't guilt or malice, but something far more complicated. "I knew about the theft. I knew someone was skimming, feeding information to the Calabresi family. When we tracked it to that location, I sent my people to secure it. Not to kill anyone, to get answers." Her hand fell away from his. "You're saying—" "I'm saying the fire wasn't supposed to happen. One of the Calabresi men torched it, rather than let us recover the evidence. By the time my people got everyone out..." He paused, and she could see him choosing his words with care. "There was one man they couldn't reach. The fire was too intense. We found remains later, but nothing identifiable." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. "You're lying." "I'm not." He pulled his hands back from her belly, the loss of warmth sudden and jarring. "I had his body examined. The DNA didn't match our records for the thief, which meant he was probably a lookout or a buyer. Someone in the wrong place at the worst time." His gaze was steady, unflinching. "I'm sorry for your loss. But I didn't kill your husband. I tried to save him." The locket felt like it was burning against her skin. 6 months of rage, of planning, of believing that the man sitting beside her was a murderer, all of it built on information fed to her by people she'd trusted because she had no one else to trust. "Why tell me this?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Because you saved my life. Because you're carrying life under my roof. And because..." One of the twins kicked again, visible even without his hand there to feel it. "Because I don't want lies between us. Not here. Not in this room." Sophia closed her eyes, felt the tears finally spill over. She didn't know what she was crying for anymore. Her husband, her mission, the man whose hand had just cradled her children with more tenderness than their own father ever had. When she opened her eyes again, Bellini was holding out a tissue, his expression carefully neutral. "Rest," he said, standing. "You need your strength." He was almost to the door when she spoke. "Mario." He turned, and she could see the surprise at hearing his first name from her lips. "Thank you. For telling me." He nodded once, then left her alone with the twins and the weight of everything she thought she knew crumbling like ash. Sophia couldn't sleep. The twins were restless, rolling and kicking in a rhythm that matched the questions circling her mind. Mario's words from earlier replayed on an endless loop. I didn't kill your husband. I tried to save him. If that was true, and the rawness in his voice suggested it was, then everything she'd been told was a lie. She was still staring at the ceiling when soft voices drifted through her partially open door. Mario and Marco, speaking in the hushed tones of men who didn't want to be overheard. Finally got the footage cleaned up, Marco was saying. You need to see this. Sophia slid carefully out of bed, her side protesting but holding. She padded to the door in bare feet, peering through the crack. Down the hall, light spilled from what looked like an office. She shouldn't follow. Should stay in bed, mind her own business. Protect the mission that was rapidly falling apart. But if they were reviewing footage from the bistro, she needed to see it. She made her way down the hallway, moving slowly to keep her footsteps silent. The office door was ajar, and through it she could see multiple monitors displaying frozen frames of al dente's sun-drenched patio. Her patio, from 3 days ago, when the world still made sense. Show me, Mario said. Sophia pressed herself against the wall beside the door, watching through the gap. Marco clicked a mouse, and the footage began to play. She watched herself move through the frame, water pitcher in hand, her pregnant belly leading the way. Watched Mario at his table, cutting into rigatoni with precise movements. The whole scene impossibly normal, impossibly bright. There. Mario leaned forward, pointing at the screen. Table 9. Freeze it. The image stopped. Sophia's breath caught as she saw herself in profile, her gaze fixed on something off-screen. Even frozen, she could read the recognition in her own posture, the way her entire body had gone rigid. Zoom in on the target, Mario instructed. Marco's fingers flew across the keyboard. The image shifted, focused, sharpened. The man in the navy tie materialized in crystalline detail. His too-still posture, his fixed gaze, and there, just visible beneath the table, the beretta resting against his thigh like a sleeping snake. Sophia's world tilted. She knew that face. Can you get a better angle on his face? Mario asked. Another series of clicks. The camera angle switched to a view from inside the restaurant looking out. Now the shooter was in full profile, and there was no mistaking him. Thomas Calabrese. Tommy to his friends. Her husband's best friend since childhood, the man who'd helped her pack up the apartment after the fire, who'd held her while she sobbed, who'd introduced her to the associates who promised to help her get justice, who'd given her the locket with the evidence chip, who'd told her exactly where and when to plant it. Run him through facial recognition, Mario said. I want to know who sent. I know who he is. The words were out before Sophia could stop them. She pushed the door open, stepped into the light, watched both men spin toward her, with hands moving toward weapons. Mario's hand froze halfway to his shoulder holster when he saw her. Sophia, you should be resting. That's Thomas Calabrese. She moved closer to the monitors, her eyes fixed on Tommy's frozen face. My husband's best friend. He was at the funeral. He helped me move. Her hand found the locket at her throat, and suddenly its weight felt obscene. He's been helping me. Helping you how? Mario's voice had gone very quiet, very dangerous. Sophia's mind raced, trying to salvage the situation, but the pieces were falling together too quickly. Tommy at the bistro. Tommy with the gun. Tommy who'd been feeding her information about Mario, encouraging her grief, nurturing her rage. "He told me you killed my husband," she whispered. "He said you burned him alive. He said the only way to keep my babies safe was to—" She stopped, but the damage was done. Mario crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. "Was to what, Sophia?" She backed up until she hit the desk, trapped between his body and the monitors, showing her salvation turning to ash. "He gave me information. Evidence, he called it. Said if I could plant it in your safe, his family would protect me. Would make sure you couldn't hurt the twins the way you hurt." Her voice cracked. "The way I thought you hurt my husband. Show me." It wasn't a request. With shaking hands, Sophia unclasped the locket. It fell open, and there, nestled where a photograph should be, was the data chip, smaller than her pinky nail, containing God knew what poison. Marco whistled low. "That's a QX7, military grade. Whatever's on there, it's not just evidence. It's a weapon." Mario plucked the chip from the locket with careful precision, held it up to the light. "How were you supposed to plant it?" "In your personal safe. Tommy said you kept it in your study, behind the Caravaggio painting." The words tumbled out now, unstoppable. "He said once I had access to your house, it would be easy. Just slip it in with your other documents, and when the FBI raided—" She stopped, seeing the expression on Mario's face. "When the FBI raided," he finished softly, "they'd find whatever's on this chip, right alongside my legitimate records. Impossible to tell what was planted and what was real." He turned to Marco. "Get tech to analyze this. I want to know what they were going to frame me with." "Mario, Sophia started, but he held up a hand. "Not now." He turned back to the monitors, to Tommy's frozen face. "Rewind to the moment before the shot. I want to see something." Marco complied. The footage rolled backward, Sophia's jump reversed, time flowing wrong, then forward again, frame by frame. Sophia watched herself spot the gun, watched her body tense, and there, right there, she saw the moment Tommy's eyes locked on hers. Not on Mario, on her. "He saw you see him," Marco murmured. "He knew you'd recognized the gun." "He adjusted his aim," Mario added, his finger tracing the subtle shift in Tommy's posture. "Look, he's tracking her movement, not mine." Sophia's legs went weak. She gripped the desk for support as the truth crashed over her. "He was going to kill me. He was going to kill you both." Mario's voice was flat, clinical. "Take out his target and the witness in one shot. When you jumped, he had to choose. He chose you." The room spun. Sophia pressed a hand to her belly, felt the twins moving beneath her palm, oblivious to how close they'd come to dying before they ever drew breath. But why? If he wanted the evidence planted, why kill me before? Because you were never supposed to plant anything. Mario turned to face her fully, and she saw her own realization reflected in his eyes. You were the plant, a pregnant widow with a grudge and a data chip. When they found your body next to mine, the chip would be discovered. Tragic murder-suicide. The evidence would be admissible. You'd be dismissed as an unstable woman, driven mad by grief. And the Calabresi family would have everything they needed to dismantle my organization. Sophia's knees buckled. Marco caught her before she fell, guided her into a chair that suddenly seemed like the only solid thing in a tilting world. Tommy came to the funeral, she whispered. He cried. He held my hand and promised he'd help me take care of the babies. The tears came hot and fast. He was my husband's best friend. He was a Calabresi enforcer, Mario corrected gently. And your husband wasn't skimming from me. He was skimming from them. They killed him, Sophia. They burned him alive to destroy the evidence of their own corruption. And then they spent 6 months turning you into a weapon. The locket hung open in her hand, empty now, just a hollow shell. Like everything she'd believed, like the friendship she'd trusted, like the justice she'd thought she was seeking. They used me, she breathed. They used my babies. They tried to. Mario crouched in front of her, his eyes level with hers. But you jumped the wrong way. You saved the wrong man. And now Thomas Calabrese is on camera attempting to murder the mother of 2 unborn children. His smile was sharp enough to cut. Which means the Calabrese family just made a very serious mistake. Sophia looked at the monitors, at Tommy's face frozen in the moment before he pulled the trigger. The man who'd helped her pack her husband's clothes, who'd recommended the bistro because Bellini eats there every Thursday, who'd given her a locket full of lies and sent her to die. What happens now? She asked. Mario stood, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. Now? Now we make sure Thomas Calabrese regrets leaving you alive. The pain hit Sophia like a freight train at 3 a.m. She jolted awake, gasping, her hands flying to her belly as it hardened beneath her palms. The contraction, because that's what it had to be, nothing else felt like this, rolled through her in a wave that started in her lower back and radiated forward with relentless pressure. No, she whispered to the dark room, to the twins, to fate itself. Not yet. Please not yet. She'd been having Braxton Hicks for weeks, practice contractions that tightened and released without rhythm or purpose. Dr. Russo had warned her they'd get stronger in the final weeks. But this was different. This felt purposeful, real. The contraction peaked and slowly ebbed. Sophia forced herself to breathe, counting the seconds until her belly softened again. 68 seconds. That's how long it had lasted. She waited, watching the digital clock on the nightstand. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just stress from the revelations about Tommy, about the chip, about everything she'd believed turning to ash. 12 minutes later, the next one hit. This time she couldn't stay quiet. A sound escaped her throat, half gasp, half moan, and she heard immediate movement from the hallway. A door opening. Footsteps. Mario appeared in the doorway, wearing sweatpants and nothing else, his hair disheveled from sleep. Sophia, contraction, she managed through gritted teeth. But it's too early. I'm only 35 weeks. They need more time. He was beside her in an instant, his hand finding hers. She gripped it hard enough to hurt as the pain crested. How far apart? 12 minutes. It's probably false labor. Braxton Hicks. Dr. Russo said, I'm calling Dr. Russo. Mario reached for his phone with his free hand, never letting go of hers. The contraction released its grip, and Sophia sagged against the pillows, sweating despite the room's cool temperature. It's nothing. I'm fine. I just need... The next contraction hit 8 minutes later. Dr. Pilot Russo arrived within 20 minutes, his medical bag in hand, and his expression professionally calm despite being roused at 3 a.m. He performed the examination with efficient gentleness, while Sophia gripped Mario's hand through another contraction. Well, Dr. Russo said, snapping off his gloves, the good news is you're not in active labor yet. Cervix is closed. The twins' heartbeats are strong. And the bad news? Mario asked. These aren't Braxton Hicks. This is early labor. Your body's warming up for the real thing. Could be hours, could be days, but those babies are coming sooner rather than later. He pulled out a fetal monitor, began strapping it around Sophia's belly. I want continuous monitoring. If the contractions get closer than 5 minutes apart, or if your water breaks, we're delivering tonight. Sophia's hand went to the locket at her throat, an instinctive gesture of comfort that had become habit. Except the locket wasn't there. Her eyes flew to the nightstand where she'd left it before bed, but the surface was empty. Panic spiked through her, sharp and immediate. "Where's my locket?" "What?" Mario was focused on the monitor Dr. Russo was adjusting. "My locket! It was right here! Where?" Another contraction cut off her words, and this time the pain brought tears to her eyes. Dr. Russo's brow furrowed as he studied the monitor. "Your blood pressure just spiked. Sophia, I need you to try to stay calm. Stress isn't good for you or the babies right now." But she couldn't be calm. The locket was gone, and with it, the evidence chip that Tommy had given her. The chip that was supposed to be in Mario's safe by now, the chip that would have destroyed him if she'd completed her mission, the chip that Mario had removed from the locket hours ago in his office. Her eyes found his, and she saw the exact moment he understood what she was asking. His expression went carefully blank. "Marco," he called toward the hallway, "bring me Sophia's locket. Should be in the office." "No," Sophia gasped. "Mario, please." "The locket your husband gave you?" Dr. Russo asked conversationally as he adjusted the monitor's position. "Family heirloom, you said?" "Yes," she whispered, even as Marco appeared in the doorway with the locket dangling from his fingers. Even from across the room, she could see it was open, empty. Mario took it, his movements deliberate. "Thank you, Marco." "That'll be all." Marco's eyes flicked between them, reading the tension, but he simply nodded and left. Another contraction built, but Sophia barely felt it past the ice flooding her veins. Mario held the locket up, let it catch the light. The empty space where the chip had been seemed to accuse her. "Mario," she started, but he held up his other hand. "Not now." "I can explain. I said not now." His voice was quiet, controlled, and somehow that was worse than anger. He closed the locket with a soft click and set it on the nightstand. "Right now, you're in early labor with twins at 35 weeks. Right now, the only thing that matters is keeping you and them safe. But after." The word was final. "We'll discuss everything after." Dr. Bartot Russo looked between them with the carefully neutral expression of someone who'd walked into a domestic situation far above his pay grade. "I'm going to step out and let you rest between contractions. I'll be right down the hall if you need me." He left quickly, probably grateful for the escape. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sophia watched Mario's profile as he stared at the fetal monitor, tracking the twins' heartbeats with an intensity that had nothing to do with medical concern and everything to do with not looking at her. "You found it," she said finally. "In the office. You know what was on it. Marco's tech team is analyzing it now." His voice was devoid of emotion. "Looks like fabricated evidence. Bank transfers to accounts I've never opened. Communications I've never made. Enough to trigger a RICO investigation even if none of it's real." "Mario, I didn't know. When Tommy gave it to me, he said it was proof of what you'd done. He said I killed your husband." Mario's jaw tightened. "And you believed him? Believed it enough to come into my home, sleep in the room I built for my daughter, let me feel your children kick, and plan to destroy everything I've built." The accusation hung between them, and Sophia couldn't deny it because it was true. All of it was true. A contraction hit, harder this time, closer. She curled forward with a cry, and immediately Mario was there, his hand on her back, supporting her despite everything. The betrayal of his touch, still gentle, still careful, made her want to scream. "I'm sorry," she gasped when she could speak again. I'm so sorry. I thought, you thought I was a monster. His hand didn't leave her back. And maybe I am. Maybe everything they say about me is true. But I didn't kill your husband, Sophia. And I sure as hell wouldn't have hurt those babies. I know that now. After you told me about the fire, about trying to save him. You've known for hours. His voice went cold. You've known since this evening, and you didn't tell me, didn't warn me. You were going to let me walk around with a weapon planted in my own house. I didn't plant it. I was going to. But then I saw Tommy on the footage and everything changed. Everything changed when you got caught. He finally looked at her, and the disappointment in his eyes cut deeper than anger ever could. If Tommy hadn't tried to kill you, would you have gone through with it? Sophia opened her mouth to say no, to swear she would have confessed, but another contraction stole her breath. This one was stronger, lasting longer, and when it finally released her, she was shaking. 6 minutes, Mario said, checking his watch. They're getting closer. Mario, please, rest. He stood, moved toward the door. Dr. Russo said you need to stay calm. We'll talk after the babies are born. After you're safe. Where are you going? He paused in the doorway, his back to her. To make sure Thomas Calabresi can't finish what he started. To protect you, even though you came here to destroy me. His shoulders tensed, because apparently that's what I do now. Protect people who want me dead. I don't want you dead, she whispered. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. I don't know. But Mario, Another contraction cut off her words, and this time when she cried out, he didn't come back. She heard his footsteps receding down the hallway, heard a door close with careful finality. Sophia curled on her side, one hand on her contracting belly, the other reaching for the empty locket on the nightstand. Through the window, the first hints of dawn were breaking over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of grey and gold. 5 minutes later, the next contraction hit. 4 minutes after that, another. And somewhere in Mario's fortress, surrounded by men who owed her nothing and a man she'd betrayed, Sophia's body prepared to bring 2 innocent lives into a world built on lies and bullets and the wreckage of trust. The contractions had settled into a brutal rhythm, 4 minutes apart, lasting 90 seconds each, leaving Sophia gasping in the brief windows between waves. Dr. Russo had moved her onto the delivery bed he'd somehow manifested in the nursery, monitors beeping steadily as they tracked 2 heartbeats that weren't hers. You're at 6 centimeters, he said after another examination. We're committed now. These babies are coming today. Sophia barely heard him. The pain had become her entire world, narrowing her focus to the next breath, the next second, the next contraction that would crest and break and finally, mercifully recede. Mario hadn't returned. She told herself it didn't matter. Told herself she deserved his absence, his anger, his cold disappointment. But between contractions, when her mind cleared enough to think, she found herself watching the door and hating herself for hoping. The explosion came at 9:47 a.m. The windows rattled in their frames, the monitors flickered, and somewhere in the compound, alarms began to shriek. Dr. Russo's head snapped up. What was... Stay with her! Mario's voice came from the doorway, sharp and commanding. He was dressed for war now. Tactical vest, weapons visible. His eyes found Sophia's for one brief moment before sliding away. Marco, secure this floor. No one gets past that door. Boss, we need you in the security room. I said secure this floor. Mario was already moving, but he stopped at the threshold, his hand white-knuckled on the doorframe. How long? Could be hours yet, Dr. Russo said. First babies, twins, early labor. There's no way to predict. Another explosion, closer this time. Sophia felt it in her bones. Felt the twins react with a flurry of movement that made the monitors spike. "They found us," she gasped. "Tommy found us." Mario's expression went flat and lethal. "Let him come." "Mario, wait." But another contraction hit, vicious and overwhelming, and by the time she could see straight again, he was gone. The gunfire started 3 minutes later. Pop, pop, pop in rapid succession, answered by the deeper boom of shotguns, men shouting, more alarms. Sophia tried to sit up, but Dr. Russo pressed her back down. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "You're in active labor. Those babies could die if Tommy breaks through." Sophia gripped his wrist, her nails digging in. "You need to get them out. Now. Do a C-section. Do whatever you have to do, but get them out before." Her water broke with a gush that soaked through the sheets. The sensation was immediate and unmistakable, a release of pressure followed by a new, terrifying urgency. Dr. Russo's eyes widened as he checked the monitors. "That's it then," he muttered. "We're on a clock now. Once the water breaks." He didn't finish, just started barking orders at the nurse who'd appeared in the doorway. "I need the delivery kit, sterile drapes, and someone to tell me we have power backup, because if I lose these monitors..." The lights flickered. Died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the nursery in eerie red. Sophia heard Marco's voice in the hallway, urgent and strained. "They breached the east gate. 4 vehicles, maybe 20 men. Boss is holding the main entrance, but they're trying to flank." Another explosion. Closer. Close enough that dust rained from the ceiling. The contraction that followed was different, deeper, more insistent, accompanied by pressure so intense Sophia screamed. Not the careful, controlled breathing Dr. Russo had coached her through, but a raw animal sound ripped from her throat. "I need to push," she gasped when she could speak. "I need to. Not yet." Dr. Russo was between her legs, checking her progress. "You're almost there. But if you push now... Sophia, look at me. Look at me." His voice cut through the chaos. "You're at 9 centimeters. 1 more. The baby's head isn't fully engaged. If you push now, you could tear. You could cause the cord to prolapse. You could..." Gunfire erupted directly below them. So close Sophia could hear the spent casings hitting the floor. Someone screamed, a man's voice, agonized and abrupt. "Marco," she called out. "Marco! Is Mario? He's fine." Marco appeared in the doorway, blood on his shirt that probably wasn't his. His weapon was drawn, eyes scanning the hallway. "But they're in the building. 2nd floor, moving up. We need to evacuate her." "She can't be moved," Dr. Russo snapped. "She's fully dilated. The baby's crowning. If we try to move her now, if we don't move her, she dies." Marco's voice was flat. "They're not here for the boss anymore. They're here to finish what Tommy started at the bistro." Sophia's hand found her belly, felt it harden with another contraction. Through the pain, through the fear, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. They were coming for her babies. "Where's Mario?" she demanded, holding the stairwell. "But Sophia, there's too many. We can't..." The door at the end of the hall exploded inward. Marco spun. Firing before the smoke cleared. Return fire sparked off the doorframe. He ducked back into the nursery, slamming the door and throwing the lock. That's not going to hold long. Dr. Russo had gone pale, but his hands remained steady. "Then we do this fast. Sophia, next contraction. You push. I don't care if you're ready. I don't care if it hurts. You push like your life depends on it, because it does." The contraction built like a tsunami, and with it came the most primal urge Sophia had ever experienced. Her body knew what to do, even if her mind was screaming that this was wrong. This was too soon. This was happening in a room under siege, with bullets punching through walls. "Push!" Dr. Russo commanded. Sophia pushed. The pain was transcendent, obliterating, a white-hot supernova that consumed everything else. She heard herself screaming, heard the door shuddering under impacts, heard Marco's weapon firing in controlled bursts. "I see the head," Dr. Russo said. "Again!" "Push again." Someone was pounding on the door now, methodical, determined. The lock wouldn't hold much longer. Sophia pushed with everything she had, felt something shift and tear and give way. The pressure released partially, and then Dr. Russo was saying, "One more, just one more." The door splintered. Marco fired 3 shots into the opening. Someone fell. Someone else returned fire, and Marco grunted, stumbled back. Blood bloomed across his shoulder. "Sophia! Now!" Dr. Russo's voice was desperate. "Push now!" She pushed, and the world narrowed to a single point of impossible pressure and release. Then Dr. Russo was lifting a tiny, blood-covered infant, impossibly small. Not crying yet. Oh God, why wasn't it crying? The baby gasped, wailed, the most beautiful sound Sophia had ever heard. "It's a girl," Dr. Russo said, clamping and cutting the cord with shaking hands. "But we're not done. The second one." The door burst fully open. Thomas Calabresi stood in the doorway, weapon raised, his face spattered with blood, and his eyes locked on Sophia. "Should have died at the bistro, Sophia. Would have been cleaner." Marco lunged, tackled him from the side. They went down in a tangle of limbs and violence. The gun discharged, deafening in the small space. Marco didn't get up. Tommy did. He raised his weapon again, this time pointing it directly at Sophia's head. "The chip. Where is it?" "Gone," she gasped. "Mario has it. It's over, Tommy. It's—" Another contraction hit, and this one brought a different kind of pain. Something was wrong. Dr. Russo's hands were inside her, his face tight with concentration. "The second baby's breech," he said. "I need to turn it. You need to die." Tommy's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot came from the hallway. Tommy jerked, blood spraying from his chest. He staggered, turned, and Mario Bellini stepped through the doorway like death incarnate. His vest was scorched, his face covered in dust and blood, and his weapon was trained on Tommy's center mass. "You came into my home," Mario said quietly. "You threatened a woman in labor. You shot my consigliere." He fired again. Tommy's knee exploded, "And you made the mistake of not finishing what you started." Tommy collapsed, screaming. Mario stepped over him without a glance, his eyes finding Sophia's. "How?" "Breach," Dr. Russo interrupted. "The second twin is breach and I can't— Sophia, I need you to push on the next contraction, but I have to turn the baby first, and this is going to hurt." "Do it!" Sophia gasped. What followed was agony beyond the contractions, beyond the gunshot wound, beyond anything she'd imagined. Dr. Russo's hands inside her, turning, manipulating, and then Mario was there, his hand gripping hers, his voice in her ear. "You're not dying in this room," he said. "You understand me? You're not dying in the room I built for my daughter. You're going to push, and you're going to live. And then you and I are going to have a very long conversation about trust and betrayal, and why I'm still standing here, instead of letting Tommy finish what he started." Sophia pushed, and finally, impossibly, Dr. Russo lifted a second tiny infant, this one already screaming her fury at the world. "Two girls," he said, his voice shaking with relief. "You have 2 daughters, Sophia." Through the pain and exhaustion and shock, Sophia heard the words that changed everything. 2 daughters, hers, alive, safe. Sophia was crowning, when her dead husband walked through the door. She knew it was impossible, knew she'd seen the death certificate, attended the memorial service, scattered ashes that the medical examiner swore were his. But there he stood in the shattered doorway, Luca Simone, thinner than she remembered, a scar bisecting his left cheek, very much alive. Dr. Russo's hands froze between her legs. "Who? Get away from my wife." Luca's voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth, persuasive. The voice that had promised her forever and delivered only lies. He held a pistol loosely, almost casually, like he was born with it in his hand. Behind him, Tommy Calabrese's body leaked blood onto the nursery floor. Sophia couldn't process it, couldn't reconcile the ghost with the flesh. Another contraction was building, the pressure unbearable, her body demanding she push, even as her mind screamed that this wasn't real, couldn't be real. "Luca!" she gasped. "You're dead. They said you were dead?" He laughed, stepping over Tommy's corpse without looking down. Yeah, that was the idea. Burn the body beyond recognition. Let Bellini take the blame and disappear with the Calabrese family's gratitude and a new identity. His eyes dropped to her swollen belly, except it wasn't swollen anymore. One baby already born and wailing in the corner where the nurse had whisked her. But then you got pregnant. Complicated things. Dr. Russo slowly raised his hands. "Sir, she's in active labor. The second baby is breech. If I don't, then don't!" Luca's gun drifted toward the doctor. "Step away from her. If he steps away, she dies." Mario's voice came from the hallway, rough with pain. He limped into view, one hand pressed against his side, where blood seeped between his fingers. His weapon was drawn but wavering. "The baby dies. You want that, Luca? Want to kill your own children?" Luca's smile was a razor. "My children are my insurance policy. The Calabrese family needs heirs. Legitimate heirs connected to both organizations through blood. Sophia was supposed to plant the evidence, trigger the investigation, and disappear with me once you were arrested." He gestured at Sophia with the gun. "But my sentimental wife had to play hero, had to save the man she was supposed to destroy." The contraction peaked, and Sophia couldn't stop the scream that tore from her throat. The pressure was impossible, the baby's position wrong, everything wrong. Dr. Russo made an aborted movement toward her, but Luca's gun snapped back to him. "I said don't move." "She's going to hemorrhage," Dr. Russo said desperately. "The baby's shoulders are stuck. If I don't manually rotate, then she hemorrhages." Luca shrugged. "I only need the babies alive." "Sophia?" He finally met her eyes, and what she saw there wasn't love or even recognition, just cold calculation. "You were always going to be collateral damage, the grieving widow, the planted evidence, the whole tragic story. But alive?" He shook his head. "Alive, you're a liability." Mario took a step forward, his weapon steadying despite the blood loss. "You're not leaving here with those children." "No?" Luca's gun swung toward the corner where Sophia's firstborn daughter lay in a bassinet, tiny and helpless. "Because from where I'm standing, I have all the leverage. You shoot me, my finger might twitch. Hate for that to happen near the baby." "You wouldn't." Sophia forced the words through gritted teeth. "They're your daughters, your blood. They're assets." Luca's voice was flat. "The Calabrese family will raise them, marry them off to consolidate power, use them the way every organization uses women. At least this way they'll live. More than I can say for you." Another contraction hit, and this time Sophia felt something shift inside her. A tearing sensation that brought hot blood and overwhelming pressure. She was going to die here. going to die in the room Mario had built for his lost daughter, surrounded by violence and betrayal, never holding both her babies at once. Mario. She didn't know what she was asking for. Forgiveness, maybe, or permission to give up, or just someone to witness what she'd tried to become in the end. But Mario wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on Luca, and his weapon had gone perfectly still. "You made 3 mistakes," he said quietly. "First, you assumed I'd be easy to kill. Second, you assumed Sophia would betray me even after learning the truth." He smiled, cold and predatory. "Third, you assumed I came alone." The shot came from the doorway behind Luca. Marco, bleeding but upright, his weapon steady despite the shoulder wound. The bullet took Luca in the back, between the shoulder blades, and he staggered forward. But his finger did exactly what he'd warned. It twitched. The gun discharged toward the bassinet, and Mario moved. He threw himself across the room, his wounded body colliding with the bassinet, tipping it. The bullet sparked off the metal frame where a baby's head had been seconds before. Mario and the bassinet went down together, his body curled around it protectively. Luca turned, tried to raise his weapon again. Marco shot him twice more, center mass, and Luca dropped. "Now, Doctor," Marco gasped, sliding down the doorframe. "Whatever you need to do it now." Dr. Russo didn't need to be told twice. His hands were on Sophia immediately, inside her, turning the baby with brutal efficiency. "Push," he commanded. "Push through the pain, Sophia. Your daughter needs you." Sophia pushed. She pushed with everything she had left, all the rage at Luca's betrayal, all the fear of the past 6 months, all the desperate love for the 2 tiny lives that depended on her surviving the next 60 seconds. She pushed while Mario dragged himself upright, cradling her first daughter against his chest with one arm. She pushed while Marco bled out in the doorway. She pushed while Luca's body cooled 3 feet away. And when Dr. Russo finally lifted the second infant, smaller than the first, blue-tinged and not breathing, Sophia pushed one final time. Dr. Russo's hands moved in a blur, clearing the airway, rubbing the tiny chest. Once, twice. The baby's mouth opened in a silent gasp, and then a wail. Weak but present, alive. 2 girls, Dr. Russo said again, his voice cracking. "Both alive. Sophia, you—" He stopped, staring at something between her legs. "I need towels. Now. She's bleeding. I need to—" The world went grey at the edges. Sophia heard Mario shouting, heard Dr. Russo barking orders, heard her daughters crying in stereo, one strong, one weak, both miraculous. She tried to stay conscious, tried to hold on to the sound of those cries, but the grey was turning to black, and the black was so inviting. The last thing she saw was Mario Bellini, Chicago's most feared man, covered in blood and dust and holding a newborn like she was made of spun glass, looking at her with something that might have been fear, or might have been something far more dangerous. Then the black took her, and Sophia Simone surrendered to the tide. Sophia woke to the sound of breathing that wasn't her own. Not the twins. She'd learned their rhythms over the past 3 days of recovery, the way they inhaled in tandem, even in separate bassinets. This breathing was heavier, deliberate, coming from the doorway where Marco should have been standing guard. She kept her eyes closed, kept her body slack. Let whoever it was think she was still unconscious from the blood loss, still helpless from the delivery that had nearly killed her. Footsteps crossed the room. The breathing grew closer. "I know you're awake, Sophia." Luca's voice sent ice through her veins. Impossible. Marco had shot him. 3 times, center mass. She'd seen him fall. Vest, he continued, reading her thoughts. Ceramic plates. Hurt like hell. But I've had worse. Something metallic clicked. A gun being cocked. Marco's dead, by the way. Bled out in the hallway while your precious Mario was getting his own wounds treated. No one's coming to save you this time. Sophia's fingers found the cold metal under her pillow. The gun Mario had left her 3 days ago when she'd woken from the emergency surgery. Just in case, he'd said, his eyes hard. Because I won't always be here to catch you when you fall. She'd thought it was punishment, a reminder of her betrayal. Now she understood it was trust. The babies, she whispered, letting her voice crack. Please, Luca. Whatever you want, just don't hurt. I already told you, I need them alive. His shadow fell across her face. You, on the other hand, you're just loose ends now. Sophia Simone, the tragic victim who died in childbirth. So much blood loss, so much trauma. These things happen. He pressed the gun to her forehead, cold and final. Sophia's eyes snapped open. You're right about one thing. What's that? These things happen. She pulled the trigger. The shot was muffled by the pillow, but the result was immediate. Luca jerked backward, a hole blooming in his chest. No vest this time, just flesh and bone, and the man who'd sold her and his daughters for money and power. His gun clattered to the floor. Sophia sat up, despite the tearing pain in her abdomen, despite the stitches pulling, despite everything. She kept the gun trained on him as he collapsed against the wall, sliding down it in a smear of red. You said you needed them alive, she said, her voice steady now. But need isn't love, Luca. Need is what parasites feel, what predators feel. She thought of Mario's hands, cradling her firstborn, the reverence in his touch. You wanted heirs, assets, insurance policies. She pulled herself to the edge of the bed, every movement agony. But you were never a father. Luca's mouth worked, blood bubbling at the corners. They're mine. No. Sophia stood, swaying but upright. They're mine, and I decide who gets to be in their lives. She thought of the locket, the lies, the 6 months of manipulation. I decide who deserves them. She shot him again, once in the chest, silencing whatever poison he'd been about to speak. The nursery door burst open. Mario entered first, weapon drawn, his movement still stiff from his own injuries. He took in the scene. Sophia standing, Luca dead. The gun in her hand, and something shifted in his expression. Marco? She asked. Alive. Unconscious, but alive. He radioed for help before passing out. Mario crossed to her, gently took the gun from her shaking hands. You should be in bed. I should be dead. Sophia sank back onto the mattress, adrenaline draining as quickly as it had spiked. He came back. He was going to... I know. Mario's hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. But you stopped him. You protected them. In their bassinets, the twins began to fuss, as if sensing their mother's distress. Sophia reached for them instinctively, and Mario lifted both infants, settled them in her arms with a gentleness that still surprised her. They need names, he said quietly. Sophia looked down at her daughters, one dark-haired like Luca, one fair like her, both perfect and alive, and hers. Isabella, she said, touching the dark-haired twin's cheek. After your daughter, if that's... Yes. Mario's voice was rough. And the other? Grace. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? Grace she didn't deserve but had been given anyway. Isabella and Grace. Isabella and Grace Bellini, Mario said. Sophia's head snapped up. Mario, they're not. Their father's dead. Twice now, officially. His eyes met hers, dark and certain. They need a name that means something in this city, a name that will protect them. And you. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. You need to decide who you want to be. The waitress who tried to destroy me? Or the woman who stood between bullets and the people she loves? Sophia looked down at Isabella and Grace. At their tiny faces and smaller hands, at the entire universe contained in 8 pounds of humanity. I don't know how to be what they need. Neither did I, Mario admitted. But we'll figure it out. Together. 1 year later, Sacred Heart Cathedral gleamed in autumn sunlight. Sophia stood at the baptismal font in a dress that cost more than 6 months of her old waitress salary, watching Father Antonio bless the twins with holy water. Isabella, bold even at 1, already reaching for the priest's vestments with curious hands. Grace, quieter, more watchful, her wide eyes taking in everything. Both wearing white lace gowns embroidered with the Bellini crest, both carrying a name that meant power and protection in equal measure. Mario stood beside her, his hand resting at the small of her back, a gesture that had evolved from possessive to protective, to something she was almost ready to call partnership. The cathedral was filled with faces she'd learned to read over the past year. Soldiers and associates, legitimate businessmen and questionable ones, all here to witness the christening of the Bellini heirs. And in the front row, Marco, still moving carefully despite months of physical therapy, holding a silver rattle he'd probably paid too much for. Do you renounce Satan? Father Antonio intoned. We do, Sophia and Mario answered in unison. The priest made the sign of the cross on each twin's forehead. I baptize you, Isabella Maria Bellini, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Sophia felt the weight of the moment settle over her like a mantle. She was no longer Sophia Simone, the struggling waitress with swollen ankles and impossible dreams. She was Sophia Bellini, at least in name, though the marriage that made it legal had been a quiet affair in Mario's study, more contract than romance. But when Mario looked at her over their daughters' heads, when he touched her with hands that had learned gentleness after years of violence, she thought maybe contracts could evolve into something real. They're beautiful, Marco said afterward, at the reception held in one of Mario's legitimate properties, a restaurant that served more than just cover for criminal enterprise. Takes after their mother. Let's hope that's all they take from me, Sophia murmured, watching Isabella gum a breadstick with single-minded determination. You saved them, Marco said simply. Twice. Everything else is just noise. That night, after the guests had left and the twins were finally asleep, Sophia found Mario in the nursery, the same nursery where she'd given birth under gunfire, where she'd killed the man who tried to claim her daughters as currency. He was standing between the cribs, one hand on each rail, watching them breathe. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. Taking us in. Giving them your name. All of it. Mario didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft enough that she had to step closer to hear. 3 years ago, I stood in this room and thought my chance at family died with my wife, that this nursery would stay empty forever. He looked at her then, and in his eyes she saw something that looked like hope. You gave me a reason to open it again. That's not something I regret. Sophia moved to stand beside him, looking down at Isabella and Grace. I tried to destroy you. You tried to survive. There's a difference. His hand found hers in the darkness. And when it mattered, when you saw the truth, you chose right. That's all anyone can do. Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness. A city built on violence and ambition and the constant negotiation between power and humanity. Inside, two tiny girls dreamed whatever dreams one-year-olds dreamed, protected by a name that meant something, and parents who'd learned that family wasn't always born from love. Sometimes it was born from bullets and betrayal, and the choice to be better than the sum of your worst moments. Sometimes it was born in a room built for grief and transformed by grace. Sophia squeezed Mario's hand, and together they stood watch over the future they'd fought for, the future that had survived. Trust isn't given, it's built, broken, and sometimes rebuilt from rubble and gunfire. Real family isn't always blood, it's the people who stand between you and the bullets. And sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is decide who she'll become when everything she believed turns to ash. Want more stories of unlikely families forged in fire? Hit that like button, subscribe for tales of redemption and second chances, and drop a comment telling us, would you have pulled the trigger? Would you have trusted Mario? Your story matters. Share it below.